mode. I guess we're live on manual breathe mode, and I get the pleasure of kicking this thing off, I suppose, Connor. That's inadvertently, but awesome. So welcome, everybody. I'd love to see in the chat if you just kind of let us know where you're here from. The numbers are growing. We're starting to see people roll in. So if you're here, let us know where you're here from and say hey, and we'll get this thing started here in just a sec, Connor, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm from Delaware. I'm actually one of 4 people that you've probably met in the entirety of your life that's from Delaware, not just incorporated.
Lots of corporations, though. Lots of corporations I've met from Delaware.
We have more corporations and more chickens than people here. We're actually like the 4th least populated state. We got just shy of 1 million people.
Degley in from LA. Josh Alkira saying hi from New Mexico. Super dope. Another one of those states you don't see a lot of people from. We've got Lakeland, Florida. Gosh, you're in my thoughts and prayers right now in Lakeland. That sucks. I'm sorry. Yes, I don't know how else to say it. Geelong, Australia. Welcome, Aussies. Winnetachi. Are y'all making up names now? Winnetachi, Washington. I think they're giving me tongue twisters on purpose. Drizzly, Seattle. Fun story. I've been to Seattle like 14 times, and every time I've gone, it has been beautiful. They have lied to me about the state of it to keep me away, I think. And then Slagle. I'm in Deadwood. Yeah, bro, right here at the Deadwood Mountain Grand, the nicest Holiday Inn I've ever stayed in my life. So yeah, let's get it kicked off. We've got a number of people here. Don't want to make everybody wait. Hey, Matt, good to see you from Boise. So we're going to talk about community. And Connor, you kind of asked me to do a slide deck on community. And of course, I said no. And we decided to do this as a fireside chat. So that's how we're going to tackle it. If we see things in the chat that take us in a different direction, we will. I have a list of things I really want to cover today. And I'm going to start by just talking about community from the lens of a technician that had been named the director of technology for about a $3 million MSP after working there for about 7 years or so. Check me on my math. I may be wrong. And I went to a conference. And I went to this conference in 2018, I believe it was. Maybe it was early 2019. And in this conference, it was the first time I, as a technical person, had been let out to go to a conference. In fact, right, we'd been the nerds sitting there at the bench and taking all the on-calls and doing the P2Vs and dealing with VECs and all the letters and things. And I went to this conference and I sat down with Eric Woodard. And I'd known Eric for a little bit, but I hadn't really known Eric very well. And Eric and I sat down, and I remember it because we were sitting just outside the main hall, and there was these nice couches, and we ended up sitting there for like an hour, in which not a non-zero amount of us cried. And he started explaining to me how he had been hiding in his basement, how he had been living right and hiding from his community members, because for last year he had been dealing with the aftermath of the early 2018 compromise that caused all of his clients to be encrypted by a threat actor. And he starts to explain to me that he had failures in the way that they had made exclusions in Sentinel-1, and the Sentinel-1 payout didn't happen. He had made explain that his red line agreements with his companies he was buying that from precluded him from getting any remuneration from them, right? It's very limited. And he started explaining all these things, and he's like, man, I wish I had done different. And of course, what he didn't know is I had just been named as the director of security and technology for a forming entity that was starting to happen that I was going to be in charge of. And I was terrified of it. I was absolutely horrified. I was director of security of a group that I didn't feel were doing the things needed to be done. And so that meeting with Eric, and I'm going to try not to tear up, gave me the power, I guess I'll say, the belief in myself, to shoot an email to my 170 employees. And I had 170 technical people that were responding to me as director of technology and director of security. And I was in charge of shaping the new tenant and entity we were all going to land in. So I sent out an email introducing myself, and I said my single greatest fear was the title of that email. And in my single greatest fear, I basically retold Eric's story. It was terrifying to me. And I said, hey, this is my single greatest fear. We have at this point, I think 17,000 humans, 20,000 endpoints that we were managing and that we were going to be responsible for. And I was trying to get things through, like deploying Sentinel-1 to everything and having it set in the protect mode, having an MDR service. Like a lot of that stuff I was trying to win battles on. And I sent out this email explaining to these technicians that I was going to be taking away their local admin rights, like control5.blank. I was going to be doing things to restrict the way they could write scripts, that they now had to go to some central department that would sign those scripts, and that was the only thing we were going to let execute. And I was trying to make these explanations of what was coming, that what was my mission, what was my belief, and how I was going to secure this entity. And I get a response back the next morning from one of those 170. And this guy says, hey, I'm in your Florida office, which I said, wait, I didn't even know we had a Florida office, right? This is okay. This is a little weird. I said, and he said, and this is my single greatest fear. He said, we actually just got ransomed back in February. This was about September. And he said, and we don't want that to happen again. We're still dealing with it. Clients are still angry. We're still doing lawsuits. And I said, well, who are you? And as it turned out, we had acquired them. And I won't beleaguer everybody with the whole story, but I wouldn't have sent that email that began my journey, right? And to finish the story, I suppose, as that week went on, I went to explain to the board that, hey, we just bought this company in May and nobody told me that you just brought them into our data center, brought their servers into our data center. Like, what the hell? Am I the director of security or not? Like, how does this play out? And instead of then responding positively, I actually got mansplained to a smidge. They kind of said, Matt, you're just a security guy. You don't understand business. Don't worry your little head. We just bought their assets. We just bought their blank. We have no risk from that. We have an indemnification policy. As time went on, though, on Friday, I get a text message that said, hey, Matt, single greatest fear came true, right? And that we had been ransomed. And so 1,200 endpoints had been detonated with Soda no Kibi ransomware. We were able to black hole a bunch of it, again, through community. And I'm making this point over and over again, because when Kyle Henselman called me, it wasn't the first time I'd met him. We had already known each other. And when he said, Matt, this is what we need to do. We need to do this to paste, black hole paste bin so that they can't pull this in-memory attack down. I trusted him, and I had that response, and he did that. Why? Because he believes in community. So I tell this story to say that if I had not immersed myself in the community and spoken with my peers about the things that had hurt them, I would never have gone down the path of explaining my vision forward. And had I not done that, I also wouldn't have been in the same level of preparedness of knowing Kyle and understanding what the vision was and what he was helping us with, right? And all that. And all that came from community. So that's my origin story of why I'm so passionate about community. And we'll get into a lot of the what I believe and how I believe it'll help you here in a bit. But for now, Connor, what's your origin story with community? Let's get this thing set off right. Tell me a story.
My origin story doesn't quite live up to that one, but I will try my best. The first person that I'd ever met that I guess is a part of this community is Wes Spencer. And then very shortly after, he told his best friend, Michael Riggs, that we needed to talk. And so those are the first two people that I met. And for those of you who don't know Wes, he was working at a company called Phin Security at the time that ended up selling to ConnectWise. Now he's running Empath. And Riggs also worked at Phin Security. And I was essentially, I was like a 24-year-old kid.
Yeah.
23 at the time. And I just flat out told both of them, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Josh, who's my co-founder and best friend, I was like, we have no idea what we're doing together. I promise, though, if you could tell us what to do and how to build things and why we should build them and how to, like, who we should be talking to and why we should be talking to them, like,
sure,
we can be the jockeys on the horse. I just need you to point us in the right direction. Like, tell us everything you know. And essentially, it's like we just begged them. It's like, if we do everything you ask and if we follow it to the best of our abilities and we are honest the whole time, and like if we become friends and we just listen to you, it's like, will you teach us everything you know? And Wes was like, hell yeah, I'm in. And Riggs was the same way. And their first piece of advice was, you got to talk to this weird guy named Kyle Spooner. I don't know if Kyle's definitely one of the panelists or one of the he's I don't know if he's in the
he'll
chat
be here
right
eventually, whether he's here now, but yeah.
And I vividly remember Riggs introduced us via email. He's like, Kyle's one of the heads of MSP Geek, biggest online community outside of Reddit of MSPs. This is the person you should get to know. He says he will teach you everything he knows for roughly $1 million. I was like, all right. So I responded. Said, hey, I don't quite have $1 million in cash, but I do have, I can get Riggs to give you a brisk hug. I can give you a firm handshake, and I have an expired Arby's coupon for a nice roast beef roughly valued at $1 million. Is that acceptable? He's like, you drive a hard bargain, but I'm in. And that was my first entrance into, is like, what is MSP Geek? Who are MSPs?
Yeah. The
whole vendor community dichotomy, how they work together, how they don't work together in some cases, and how to rectify that. And it was kind of just like a, jumping in the deep end doesn't give it justice, because literally in the span of one day, I went from no idea what this community was or what any community was to, I'm in MSP Geek and people are bothering me. I'm on Reddit and people are bothering me. I'm on Discord and people are bothering. It's like, hey, here's this random kid who says he wants to build shit for us guys. Give him hell. Like literally that was like what Kyle had essentially put into the universe. And then I remember like shortly thereafter, a couple of months, I met Jason Slagle.
Oh,
Slagle.
Terrible.
He's also,
great stuff. No idea.
He's also like one of the people, I'd say the most outspoken voice in the community for a lot of really good reasons. And he's like, hey, Connor, there's this late night call. A bunch of us are getting together. It's a regular thing we do here at MSP Geek. Like, you should join. I was like, oh, cool. Like, what do we do? He's like, just grab a couple of beers and join. This was in the height of COVID. So I joined this call, and I had no idea what was going on. So I joined this call. There's like 50 other people, and Jason brings me up to, like, promotes me to presenter on the Zoom call. He's like, hey, Connor, yeah, you didn't know this. I'm pen testing your shit right in front of all these people to see if you're full of shit or not, and if your platform's garbage. And it's like I'm already like 2 IPAs into the night. I'm just like sweating. I'm like, oh, I'm not sober enough for this right now. Like, I started sweating so much, and then like 30 minutes in, it's like I was like, all right, I'm done. You're fine, whatever. Like, we'll do this some other time, but you're okay. And I was just like, holy shit, that was scary. So that's my story.
And, tackling that from just the perspective of that immediate immersion, I think communities, especially MSP communities, at least the healthy ones, and we'll get into that in just a minute, I think are very inclusive and make you feel, included. I guess I just use the same word to define it, but let's tackle what is a community, right? Let's maybe try to unpack that. I have a definition from Anthaholic, which is looking at it from an anthropologic perspective, but a community is a group of individuals sharing common values, comma space, interests, comma space, or geographic location. So not necessarily all of them, right? It could be interests, not values, could be values, not interest, geographic location, who interact with one another on a more frequent basis than others outside the community, right? The concept of community holds significant sociological and anthropological implications and has evolved dramatically within the advent of technology and the internet, right? Think about it. Communities now used to be very relegated to geographic location or communication capabilities, and now they're very, very close and very, very proximal, right? We've got people from Dublin. We've got people here from Tampa. We've got people, I guess, from Winnetachee. I don't know if that's real. I think they're still trolling me here. Washington, right? And all of those people are here and joined in, even though we aren't geographically close. But from a community perspective, it's a group of people that share ideas, interests, or geographic location, and communicate with one another on more frequent basis. So let's unpack that first. If you say, I joined a community, but you do not participate in that community, you have not joined a community. You have simply had your name on the roster. I think the definition of this is, and I'll start with my first bullet point of what you should take away from this is, if you join a community, go be active in that community, right? At least in some form or fashion. Be known, ask your questions, share, give back. We'll get into a lot of those later. What are your thoughts on this definition of community, Connor? Like, basically, group of people with like interest, in our case, MSPs, we are MSPs, sharing ideas and sharing interests. Is that a good definition? An audience, what do y'all think about that definition of community while he's answering?
I think it's a great start. I think there are there's one thing that I would add. It's like, in my mind, I go back to the question, we were talking about this a little bit before. It's like, what separates a community from a religion or a cult? It's like, those are groups of people with shared values or common interests. But why would we not consider that a community? Although it is a community in its own aspect, but it's a religion, and there's a community aspect as a part of that.
Well, the commonality is the religion, right? In that in that definition, but the commonality could be other things, right? There's other types of cults, usually religion, but yeah, for sure.
And I would say, I go back to, it's not that every idea gets to be immediately accepted. It's that every idea gets its spot in the arena. So it's like, as a community, like one of the reasons why I don't believe anyone should be a lurker in a community that they are a part of or wants to be a part of is like, your ideas, the way I phrased it to not only my friends, but some employees of mine is, if you don't speak your ideas into other people's lives, like, you're robbing them of the ability to like consult them, to understand how does that work with their own opinions and how does that work with their own ideas. And I've seen it many times, mostly honestly in person, like at the Starbucks near a conference is where most of the conversations occur.
Hallway con.
Yeah, hallway con. All of the ideas get their spot in the arena, but it's not that they're immediately accepted. So like, when I compare that to how religion or a cult, it's like there are very clear bumper rails on the bowling alley, so to speak. It's like, no, if you step outside of this, there is no place for that here. It's not even going to be a discussion. Yeah. Whereas in a community with a shared interest, that's not the case. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because to your point, like, and we were going to tackle this as well, of like what's healthy and what's not healthy in a community. And we'll start getting into that. I think some of the not healthy aspects in a community typically define when a community becomes a cult. But I do think from an outside looking in, right, of saying, hey, all ideas are this. If you step outside these ideas, a lot of people have called that like toxic positivity, right? Where you can be completely gung-ho as long as it's about these things in this space. And if you have anything outside of that, then you're out, right? The other thing that I'll speak towards from that community perspective of not accepting all ideas, sometimes I'm freaking wrong. Sometimes I need a group of people to go, no, you're wrong. I disagree. Here's some context of why you're wrong, right? And I think one of the things that I would say is part of healthy, maybe we should pivot into this, of like, what's healthy, right? Jason Slagle, we know you're a cult, and I'm wrong a lot. The community usually tell me, right, the community will tell you, you'll get that 3 calls from people you trust to go, Slags, smidge out on the outside, bro. That's maybe not okay, right? And like that's the point. And I think that a healthy community shows inward signs of self-correction, right? That it really is a place for, to your point, Connor, all ideas to come and be seen and discussed and fed back with in ways that are positive, that don't destroy somebody. Like, you're stupid has no place in a community. That's part of that's part of toxic aspects of that. Now, some people are stupid, but that doesn't mean we call people that. No, I tease. That's horrible.
You make a really good point. Is that you're stupid has no place, but you're wrong does. It absolutely
That's
does.
Right. Absolutely. One's empirical, one is diminutive, right? And I think we're not trying to be diminutive. We're only trying to be empirical in a community, at least.
One thing I've appreciated about a lot of the people I've met here, a lot of people that I now call friends, is like everyone has a unique story as to how they got to here right now. So if you go, like the career path I was on was to be a professor of mathematics. It's like, it's a very defined path to get there. Sure. Here's the set of experiences you are going to have. You know, there's very little variation. And now I talk to people, they're like, dude, I was waiting tables a year ago. And then I just, I offhandedly mentioned that I have an interest in, I'm going to make random words, very inexperienced, Linux and other bullshit. And now all of a sudden I have a job, and this is how and I love it. I actually have a buddy who's a truck driver, and he actually took a bunch of cybersecurity courses at his university through the whatever the program is, if you're a veteran, to get free education. And now he's joining the cybersecurity force. So, VA. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So back on that's awesome. And one of the things that we talk about, like, what makes a group healthy. Let me call out some great and amazing, communities that I have listed here, and you guys make fun of me if you want. But MSP Geek comes to mind, right? Black Hills Information Sec. I literally just had this conversation of, they have inadvertently built an amazing community that's caused them to escape their current conference, escape into other conferences, right? They're doing a lot of the things that we're going to talk about of what makes a healthy community here. I like IT Nation for its own right in some respects, and a lot of the people that I've met through that space and the Evolve groups and things in that realm are amazing community participation. PAX 8, got to shout out PAX 8. Right, try to build that community as much as I can. And I think there's these accidental out communities and on purpose communities too, right? Like, even if you look back at the beginnings of like MSP Geek Con and MSP Geek, that was an accidental community, in my opinion, that kind of built up and started to grow into something even more. But just those are some examples of amazing ones. But there are bad communities, ones that are toxic for you, right? Like, in my mind, if you join a community, it should be to better yourself and the community. That's the purpose of joining a community, is that I want to maybe get a question answered, right? Like, think back to the first time I went onto Lab Tech and go, why is this happening? And somebody goes, because of this, right? Like, you go on to get maybe that. But as you start living in that community, it should be building. It should be mostly having answers. And I'll kind of say this, in my mind, what is a healthy community? I tell my children that their life mission for success, in my opinion, is to give more than you take. If you always give more than you take, it just seems to work out that you always have enough. It's a very weird kind of ratio that plays out. And so when I think about a community, the community has a sum of its members that are giving, that are willing to help, that when they see that question, they tackle it, and you see 13 answers because 13 people have said, this is what I think I can give back to this person, or here's what I'd like to press back. I think that you'll see more people giving than are on the sidelines lurking. Right? That's one of the things that I'd like to say makes a healthy group, right? You look back to the qualities of MSP Geek and what's happening in there. It's basically all of that, right? You see all the channels for different things that someone might have interest in or needs in, right? You have, to your point, and maybe we tackle this, it's how they manage the MSPs community of both practitioners and consumers, as well as vendors and sellers. And Connor, you have direct kind of view of that side of it. Maybe we tackle that for a bit. What makes it healthy for that relationship of marrying the vendors and the consumers together?
I would say one of the first experiences I have watching the interaction between the vendors and MSPs who they serve and vice versa was I went to IT Nation Secure in 2021 as a vendor in disguise, which is very frowned upon now. And one of the first things I noticed was like, why does it feel like I'm back in high? I'm at like a middle school dance. It's like there's vendors on one side, there's MSPs on the other, and there's like 4 people in the middle. It's like, are those just the brave 4 people, or like what's going on? But in terms of like how to handle uh, that relationship, I think it goes back to the activity that you mentioned. It's like don't just be lurkers. I think not only should vendors get called out for the good things they do, but also the bad things. It's an opportunity to grow. But one of the things that's led to my success and Finn's success is like just frankly, do people like us and do we listen? It's like
Yeah.
if we messed up, we owned up to it and tried to rectify that as best as possible. But if we did something good, it was never with the expectation of, all right, we're going to get so much clout for this. It was always like
Well,
people feel.
let me poke at something. You used a word bad. If vendors do something bad. And then in that direct context, when you make mistakes, you don't define them as bad. And I'll reference back to something someone made a comment the other day, but I use it frequently, which is everyone's the hero in their own story. Right? Like there's nobody walking around going, I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad. Maybe I'm wrong, but nobody's going, I'm the bad guy. They're going, I'm the good guy here. I'm trying. I didn't do anything wrong. I just made marketing. The point I'm trying to make is when it comes to vendors in the community, we shouldn't treat them any different than us. We're trying to run a business. We're trying to make money. We're trying to survive and serve our clients and our constituents. There's an element of love for our clients that exists and why we do what we do. Same thing for vendors. So when they make mistakes, they're just like me not having that technician show up on Tuesday, even though I promised I'd have him there on Tuesday, and nobody on the project team actually coordinated getting the cables terminated, right? And so we're going to have to push out opening of that building 2 days. Did I do anything bad? Or did I simply fail to live up to what my own expectations are? And I think what you find in a community is the vendors that and practitioners that come in with a belief of, I'm just trying to serve my clients. Am I being listened to? You said it well, right? Am I listening to my clients? And am I liked? Those both apply. And a lot of that actually comes out in vendors that see it and get it because they're just trying to run their business. And I think in a community, you often blur some of those lines between a vendor and a MSP. We're all just trying to serve the same point. We're all trying to make a profit. We're all trying to serve some mission. We're all trying to help our partners and clients. And usually if you're not, you're seen out pretty quick in a community. Right? The benefit of a community is one can get rid of that voice that is consistently wrong or consistently pejorative or consistently negative. And maybe we should pivot to that, Connor. Like, how does a community stay at a certain level it started? If you accept anything, how do you manage to maintain that community identity, if you will? Great call out. I didn't mean to leave out Nigel and Tech Tribe. In fact, I'll take just a pause. Sheila said, Tech Tribe is a gold mine of generosity, advice, concrete resources. True story. In fact, Nigel literally picked me up in Australia and drove me around for a day and introduced me to his country. And he's always been a giver. And even my origin story goes back. When I first decided to get on a stage, I was terrified. And the week or so before my first presentation, I met with Nigel, and he was standing out at the beginning of a conference that he was speaking at. I think it was in 2020 at AUVIC's conference. And I said, man, why are you so calm, and how are you doing so well? I was like literally looking for him in this community to give me some, Matt, you're going to be okay. And he's like, I'm not. I'm terrified. This is my first one. And I'm like, this doesn't help. No, I tease. But yeah, great shout out for the Tech Tribe. Another amazing community. I apologize.
Where are you seeing this chat, by the way? I have looked everywhere.
You have to click on the top right with the chat. It's above the Q&A on the right, in the little shadow buttons on the right there. There's chat. There's people. There's
I have that chat, but I guess I joined the kickoff chat. And now I don't get updates. So
that's the bottom one. There's one above, I think. There should be a top chat, not the bottom chat. Bottom chat's this private one where I'm going to say something funny. Anyways. All right, y'all get to see how the sausage is made. Coming back to it. Sorry. I'll keep an eye on I'll keep an eye on the chat. Yeah, very good. Sorry. So back to this, like what could be bad in a community? What could be good in a community? What's a good sign of health? Good sign of health, they're like positive, giving. I want to shout out we got one called out from Degley. Definitely a key aspect of community is about helping each other. If you come across someone who needs guidance, don't be afraid to give it. That might mean proactively. Like that might genuinely be like, man, I want to reach out to Slagle right now and tell him about something. And the flip side of the coin, don't be afraid to receive that guidance, which actually tackles one of my key traits of positive. Is the group humble? Is the group humble? If you were to look at the totality of them, are they the Wes Spencers and the Alex Farlings and the Connor Swalms, or are they those lazy, loudmouth Matt Lees, right? Or are we in this humble group, or are we seeing a lack of humility? Does the group walk around thinking we're the best, we're so much better than everyone? There was a talk I just went to last week at GERCON, and it was by an anthropologist and sociologist that's turned into cyber. And he is approaching looking at cyber by the shame kind of culprit. What he talks about is that when I say to Connor, I can't believe you didn't know that, I'm actually putting you down and making you feel dumb and kind of being pejorative accidentally, right? As opposed to, oh, Connor, bro, let me show you this. This is so cool. I'm so happy that you told me you didn't know this. Those are very different, right? As an outcome. So anyways, just is the group humble is a definition. So if you're looking at a group to go join, do you see a lot of people giving? And go givers, a great call out, right, Sheila? 100%, right? Are they go givers? Are people giving more than they're taking in the group? Do you see positive, or do you see people bashing each other and making fun of each other in ways that are negative? Now, we'll always tease, like, Will Brooks, king of that, right? 100%. But it's that. So
if anyone meets Will Brooks at a conference, do not let him show you a magic trick.
It's fair.
Just PSA, and he'll hate me because he just goes around throwing decks of cards in people's faces and calls it magic tricks these days. And
wham! How about that?
I've known Will for so long that I should have seen it coming, and I didn't until the cards hit my face. So.
The other thing I would tackle is, what is the purpose of the group, right? What is the purpose of the community? And one of the things that really bothers me, again, is every group a community. No, they could be cults. They can also be places where you are sold a bill of goods for your own success that will turn into probably your own failure. And the way I look at this is the community full of givers, or is the community a battery? If you walk into a community where everything is about how well you're going to succeed, and there's nothing else that'll ever happen in your world, and I'm going to show you the keys to success, you'll be able to be profitable, everything's going to be great, pay me $75 a month. If you walk into a world where you're just being the battery, where you are being exhausted as a resource for the betterment of someone else at the top of that group, those probably are not communities. I think that communities can't be owned. I think there's an aspect of this that might ruffle some feathers, right? Especially for the successful ones in the room, the MSP Geek Cons. I don't think you own it. I think in some way you are at the right place at the right time, and you have the ability to do good and continue to manage that group. But people's interests come and go. People's interests fade. Social circles shift, and the things that you do shift. And I think that community as a definition is nothing you can ever own. And so if you are going into something and paying a certain amount of money to gain success or have a boot camp or things it's probably not community as much as it is maybe what it is, a boot camp or a method to hold you accountable, I think. Someone said, Will Brooks said, that's a fantastic point. A community is a functioning body where different roles and gifts play out as people enter and exit. 100%. It's somewhat of a transient nature, right? If nothing else, humans are somewhat transient. We die. It's weird how that functions. So at the very longest limit, 95 years is probably like at the outside of that number. And the best communities don't have owners, they have facilitators. And I think that's the kind of language to look out for, right, William? Like, that's a great call out, right? I own this group. And I've seen even great groups that I love and admire play with that a bit sometimes of, I own this. And I think to the point, it should be facilitated, managed, run, because you have to have somebody making sure the community isn't being filled with the wrong things. You could gain a lot of bots that maybe some company decides to use as a method to manipulate people's imagery of them. I'm not saying any names.
Who would do that? Yeah.
Nobody would do that. That's a terrible douche move. Nobody would do that.
It's a bad thing, right?
Yeah, it's bad. I would categorize that as bad. It is trying to change it'd be like sending 5 texts of how much you hate someone and then deleting them and being like, no, I didn't send those. No. We didn't have these conversations.
The best way I heard countering if any company does do that is a statement that was like, instead of changing our public perception, we took to double down on our misinformation campaign and not change our public perception. Just like,
and that is the other side of it, right? Let's think back to bigger parts of community. Like, communities would have formed in geographic areas of people like-minded, right? You can look back to all kinds of different clubs and fraternal organizations. I myself, Mason, right, Shriner, things of that nature. There's communities that have formed over history. The interesting part about it, and this also, without getting too far into why this matters for cybersecurity, makes it really easy because of how proximal we all are now due to the internet. Now that everything is a community I can build up in just Slack that doesn't have to have an identity. Even look at MSP. God bless us, Reddit, an MSP subreddit, half those accounts are fake. Most of those accounts are disingenuous at best, right? And you get into this world where the lack of vetting who comes in because of the proximal nature of the internet means that you have to do a lot to try to keep that community healthy, because what used to work by me literally running somebody out on rails, like I'm in the Wild West, so I figured it was appropriate, right? Like tar and feather and out. Like they just left. They weren't in this community anymore. We ejected them. They left. You can't necessarily do that in this way. You might have 12 MSP subreddit accounts that you set aside for different trolling purposes, right? And so when you get into this world, like I think a good community really does know its members. I think a good community really does drop a lot of those errors, and I can easily find out that's Connor from Phin, and that's Matt from Matt, or whatever it may be. And I think the point is that good communities, in my mind, lead towards non-anonymity. I'll probably get thrown rocks at for that, but that's okay, my privacy peeps. I love you too.
There's a lot of people that want privacy. There's also a lot of reasons, specifically in a community where you're focused on enrichment and not, I guess, monetary enrichment specifically. You'd want that goodwill, you'd want that good advice, and you'd want people to attribute the advice you've given them to your name. So it's like, if you're insert random Reddit handle and you're just out there consistently enriching the community in positive ways, not just negative. You can enrich negatively too.
I understand.
It would do you justice. It would do the company you work at justice. If you'd like to start your own, or if you'd like to do your own thing and be a consultant, it would do you justice to attach your name to that.
Isn't that nuts? In fact, ask Jason Slagle, what's your name on Reddit? Well, it's mine. I'm Cyber Matt Lee. Not too hard to figure out that one's me. Yeah, like totally.
Yeah. You're going to get doxxed pretty soon now.
Yeah, like, I found him out. I found him. I digress. But yeah, to your point, let's talk about what I think you get out of a community, right? We're getting closer to the end of this time frame. What do you get out of a community? Why join a community? I'd love for you to tackle it first, see how many out of mine you knock out. But what's the first point you think people get out of a community? Colin. I keep trying to call you Colin. My brain is broken today. I'm just going to lean into it. You're Colin now.
If anyone knows this, Jason will know this reference. I'm Colin, the ConnectWise partner, and I've started in this industry as Colin, the ConnectWise partner, and never changed. I think, I guess I'll look at all the things I've gotten from this community. The first is a ton of friends, a lot of friendship, like legitimate.
Yes.
Even though a lot of us talk almost exclusively online or through Zoom chats, every time we, sometimes we can overdo it at conferences and we can party a little too hard. We forget why we're there, but it always feels like a reunion with some of my best friends. It's like, I'm getting together with these people. I see them 2 or 3 times a year. This is amazing. I love it. The second thing is I've been able to build largely a successful business off the back of the relationship I have with them. And it's not I always say if relationships are one-sided, eventually they'll go away because that's just parasitic and they'll drain the host completely.
The host eventually dies. Like that's how it works. Back to that whole death thing, unfortunately.
Right. And so it's like entering the community with the phrase, with the mindset, I have no idea what I'm doing. You guys know all about your problems.
Ooh, look at that humility. If you look at that humility.
I mean, I would say it's humility. It was the God's honest truth. When I started Phin, I was living in my parents' basement, borrowing money from my mom and dad because I had lost everything doing a real estate investment. That's a story for another day.
It's a good story. I've listened to it.
And so literally, I had nothing but my parents tolerating me living in their house and eating their food and driving their cars. And I was like, I got nothing. I will listen to every word you say. I will build in this direction if you will help me.
So you got friendship and the benefit that comes to business. I'm going to say that, for me personally, I don't make a lot of friends. I'm very, very mission focused. I'm very, very OCD. I know it's hard to believe. I very, very, very stay on a certain focus. And I also am somewhat of an introvert. But the friends that I do have create actual comfort for me, right? When I go and sit down in a group with people that I've made camaraderization, which is my take on this one, camaraderization and friendship, I definitely feel more confident. I don't feel as alone and out there in that space. So I'll share that making those friends was letter F on my list, but it is definitely a huge one. I would say my first one that I put in of why you join a community is knowledge share. I think at a purely functional level, if one was to look at it that way, we are MSPs serving clients who don't give a shit about the changing landscape around us, do not fucking want to understand, have said you're the guy, and we don't know any of the freaking answers. And so when you walk into that world, there's almost an immediate need for that camaraderization and friendship and knowledge share. And I know that I've personally benefited, and I also although it's hard to accept, know that I've influenced other people and helped them in that way, right? And so it's really awesome to know that there's knowledge share where what's interesting, and this goes back to a TED Talk talking about how dogs can make another generation of dogs, but that next generation of dogs will never get any smarter, will never get any more capable, will never get to where they can now go build a bridge. But as humans, we have this weird little trait that I can tell you something, Connor, you can then go use it and not spend the weeks it took me to learn that. That's an interesting flywheel effect that exists as a result of humans being able to write down knowledge, share knowledge between generations, continue knowledge as a continuance of our life beyond our lifespan. And so the interesting part is that's why I think communities form. Like the first communities of doctors, like they could literally go, man, am I cutting off the leg or is it leech time? Where else can I put those fancy leeches? Do you have those special African leeches? Like, and then it became new stuff they could do. Like the community itself grew until eventually you have your bodies of knowledge, American Medical Association, ADA, right, bar, all of those spaces. We're in that world. We're making it up. We're service providers before we were VARs and before we were like, but at the end of the day, it's only been this lifespan of a business, right? It's only been this many years. And so I think the interesting part is knowledge share. So what else? What else you got? Why else would you join a community?
There was knowledge share, there was friendship. I've seen a lot of people actually get opportunities that they've wanted and be more excited about the direction their life and their career takes as a result of having, like I live by the principle, people help people they like. So it's like, if you genuinely are interested in the community, if you're interested in the people, if you're interested in the, the go-giver mentality you brought up, which is I give to this community more than I take. Yeah. There is an opportunity to define a whole different career, define your existing career, and have opportunity to move up and however you decide to define that.
Yeah.
I've seen that 100 times. Like when anyone shares hey, there's this great person, I'm sharing this to my network. Here's their resume. I'd really appreciate it if you could also share it. It's like instantly that person gets phone calls. I've seen it happen. So
I have too. And defense, right? Let's go back to that. I'll call it straight out. Tara was dealing with some crap and the community really rallied around her. And I think that is a place where I think of it as, and you define this as my D, which was a place to get help, right? Resources. It's also a bit of C, which is giving back and mentoring, right? You have this go-giver mentality. You have people that are kind of out there, a place to get help. You're like, hey, I need a job. Can you help me, right? And you pass off this resume and it helps out the next person, those type of things. And I think that piece is there as well. There's another big one that I think is there for me personally, which is combating imposter syndrome, right? When I first went to my boss and said, hey, I want to do all these things. Can we negotiate with ConnectWise and change the red lines of our agreement? I had to have somebody like say yes to that. But I had a community of people that had already said, this is something we need to do. I felt empowered by sitting down with Eric and having that conversation and then asking 3 or 4 more people in my communities if they agreed and all getting the same answers of, yes, I'm now at a $20 million revenue. I can start flexing that a little bit and changing some of those legal agreements perhaps, right? So combating imposter syndrome. Having a group behind you when you go to say something is huge. And even if I put myself in Tara's shoes last week or 2 weeks ago, the ability to reach out and spend time with Jason Slagle and other people speaking about what the thoughts were on that turned into direct support. And I would imagine, I won't put words in her mouth, but I would imagine that she felt more supported in her actions and decisions that she made forward from there because of that combating of imposter syndrome to some extent, support of a community to some extent, protecting our tribe. Sorry, I had to drop a tech tribe, just I forgot them earlier. Protecting our tribe, like those aspects of it are huge. And that comes from the friendship and the things that we talk about in that way, right? Because perception is reality. And those that we spend the most time with are the people we'll know the most and make decisions to help. So I think it's about giving back and mentoring, a great place to get help for resources we've covered. We haven't covered this anthropologic and sociologic value. And I do want to touch on that just a little bit. Like, why is it at some point we as humans decided to walk up to that place where another human had fire and sit down and try to see if they'd share some portion of that deer they hit with me, right? Why? Because we have this need to belong. If you don't believe that, go watch the Discovery Channel show Alone and see how quickly people break down psychologically when they are alone. And now imagine in your world, you're living in a place where you generally feel alone, made even worse by pandemic, right? In that definition. And so communities in my mind satisfy that sociologic value. For me, that is my friends. Like I don't have many other outside of this life experiences. In fact, everyone that I speak with on a general daily basis, I've met through work and my mission. That's it. And so when you think about that, that means that these communities solve that sociologic need for me to be accepted and belong. Yeah, Degley, inclusiveness, empowerment, belonging, they're powerful things. They will make a human do thousands of times more capability than they would have had if they didn't have that support, right? The ability to go, yeah, Connor agrees with me. We've talked this out. Let's go, right? Somebody talked me off a ledge and I was wrong. I'd like to withdraw my statement. Any of those two things play out. The other thing I think, and I'll add this one and see if you can come up with another, if not, we'll get close to questions, is like the commiseration aspect. Think of it this way. I did a talk at Beyond. It was at 7:30 a.m. It was a breakfast panel. I had 200 people in the room, and we did all wrong answers, right? So we said MFA is bad, right? And then we had to explain why we were agreeing with that statement, and it got quite raucous. But what I had hoped to do, and it turns out I did, was deliver some catharsis, because every fucking thing we said had been said by some dumb jackass that we were trying to convince to do something. We were tackling the community pain of somebody going, no, this is so bad because, or no, I shouldn't. And all these things that you just know that people have said. And so what's funny is I think the ability to commiserate amongst your peers in something that wouldn't necessarily be public or wouldn't be beneficial necessarily to put out and stab people over, but to commiserate and go, I can't believe we have these 3-year contracts and I just had to sign another one, or brownie face 1,000 times. That is commiseration, right? That is a group of people. And everybody knows the frowny face incident I'm talking about, but that is commiseration. And it actually makes you feel healed, right? Like, in my opinion, the ability to commiserate, we think bitching's all bad. It's not all bad. Sometimes talking about actual problems in our world in a way that is just commiseration is valuable for your mental health, I suppose. Yes, this sucks. We all know it sucks. Everybody thinks it sucks. We agree. And then Adam said, by doing that, it allows you to play devil's advocate on how you can speak to clients that do make those comments. Yeah, 100% right. That was the intention of it, was to be able to give somebody this. And I was explaining this to somebody this morning too. There's an impact or an aspect of having seen something firsthand. And I use this to tell this story to an audience. I say, me, Connor, and Jason Slagle are standing at the very top of a mountain overlooking a precipice down 1,000-foot fall. And if I reached over and gently shoved Connor to his death, is there any chance that Jason Slagle doesn't take an action against me, take a defensive posture, or run down the mountain? And if he does run down that mountain, is there any chance that if he runs into somebody else like Will Brooks coming up the mountain and says, hey, there's some dude up there pushing folks off the mountain, is there any chance that Will doesn't believe him? No. Why? Because he's touched by fire. He watched somebody get pushed off the freaking mountain. My point of why commiseration and having people in a group and a community share these thoughts is that you are empowered and you believe what you're saying. When you say, no, we're doing this, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, we're deploying this, and this is going to happen, they believe you because they're that Will Brooks coming up the mountain, and you're the one coming down saying, no, I know this is what we have to do. I've seen it. I've seen what's at the top of that mountain. I don't know if I meant that pun, but I'm good. So anyways, what Matt is saying is we all learn to be around people who understand the struggles. Yeah. 100%, William. You get it. Yeah, 100%. And then do I push the pusher in this scenario? I guess it depends. I think Will Brooks is a push the pusher guy. I think so. I think that's possible. Yeah. But anyways, I digress. Connor, what are your thoughts? What else have we missed? And then we'll tackle questions if there are any.
I mean, on the commiseration, there's absolutely a peace of mind that comes with shared pain, whether, and you could extend that outside of the community is like,
all communities, just different
all communities. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm not alone in going through this. I can complain and people understand where I'm coming from. It's like having a shared perspective allows you to share the pain, which makes it, less detrimental to yourself. I guess one thing that I've always thought about in relation to this community is it's largely like a statement that actually Joe Rogan made about having kids. And he said for the first time in his life when he had kids, he realized how bad the relationship was with his parents and how badly they treated him, only because he had something now to compare to, which is how he felt about his kids.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I'll mention is like, you don't know what it's like to be pulled into parasitic relationships until you've experienced what an unparasitic relationship is. So if you join a community filled with people who do give more than they take, and most important part of that statement is have that as a shared value. It's like you need to place that value right at the top.
That's it. There you go, Connor. You just solved it. That is the shared value that should be between all of us. Do we give more than we take? Is that the humans we allow in here?
And so when you recognize that, it allows you to have this like radar. It's like, oh, I met this group of people, or I met this person, or hey, you're saying these things, but that doesn't quite jive with what I want and what the rest of the community probably wants about this. Either you should stop that. And in some cases, people do get told to F off. In other cases, they're like, you know what, you're right. After thinking about this, like you had mentioned, after thinking about this, I was wrong. My bad.
A lot of
How
power
can
in
I
that.
make, yeah, how can I
A
make
lot of
this
power in
better?
that. And that's not a corollary just for this type of community. That's for your relationships. That's for your life. That's everything, right? Don't be so afraid to say, I made a mistake. We all do it. And whether we gloss over it or not in our brain, I think is my definition of when you reach the Peter principle or
Yeah.
not. The moment you can no longer say I was wrong means you've probably reached the pinnacle of your capabilities, is probably, in my opinion.
One piece of advice I always give to everyone is never punish the behavior that you want to incentivize. So if
Yeah.
someone is able to have it does take a humility, it does take courage to publicly admit they were wrong, or even privately to you admit that they were wrong. It's like never shove that back in their
Beat them
face.
afterwards.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
like
that
you had
doesn't work.
mentioned, it's like, Connor,
Yeah.
you don't know that? You're an idiot.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
do you ever want me to engage in a fruitful relationship with you if every time I come to you with hey, I messed up, or I don't know these things, you respond with you're a loser, you're an idiot, why would you think those things? So, and your statement is accurate. That does not just apply to this community or any community. It applies to your relationship that you have with everyone, and every
Yeah.
relationship you have with any organization. Never punish behavior. And actually, he's probably going to get embarrassed, but I'll call him out here. Jason Slagle does this very well. He will shit on a vendor if they do horrible things, if they're acting in what he believes to be malicious ways. But the second they change their tune, the second they start acting differently, he'll be the first to cheerlead it, to call it out, to say,
You're not
hey,
wrong. Yeah.
you were screwing up. You're doing great now. Keep it up. I'd love to see more of this.
And you, without taking it out into like a World War study, if you look at the way certain countries were punished after World War One, they predicated World War II, at least by most scholarly definitions. And I think to the point is, when someone has the grace to say, I made a mistake, don't treat people as purely black or white or good or bad or positive or negative or any of those things. Treat things as we're all human and we're all the hero in our own story. And so I think it's about shaping the story for people and helping them understand where they've made failure. And Jason does that amazingly. Now, usually punches in the face first as a methodology, but it works. People follow.
It takes a little bit to get him out of the hole he's crawling into these days. So,
But yeah, to your point, once they've made that decision, you can't then just alienate someone. We want the community to be bigger. And maybe that's the other side of it. We do want this community to be inclusive. We do want people to be givers. We can coach people to be givers. We can give that change, I think, in most scenarios, right? We can change the story for people. I wanted to end with one more thing of how do you leverage success? And then we've got to get to the questions. But by the way, put questions in if you will. We have one in there. We have one to tackle. But go to the questions section on the right and add questions if you have any. How do you leverage a community for your own success? We've talked about all the positives, the giving back, place to get help, anthropologic and sociologic value, friendship, camaraderization, commiseration, action. I think there's also a place, if you look back to the term that's been used in history of this person is an upstanding member of our community. Now, in that case, they were being inclusive of a geographic region, right? Usually a city or a state or something of that nature, right? But when you think about it, how do you leverage your success? Well, I think that if you are giving more than you take, there should be value to gain. I think to your point, Connor, you've already done this, but specifically kind of my examples as I was building Iconic and building my own role in certain communities, I started realizing I could help other vendors by talking about their stuff and using the position that we had built in the community, both from our size and the things we did to give back as an organization. Yes, companies can be community members. It doesn't just have to be humans, right? So we as a company started saying, hey, Phin, why don't you guys give us your training? We'll use it. We won't pay for it, but I'll talk about what sucks. I'll give back to you. I'll go to the community, tell them about what's great. I'll tell them about what sucks, why you should still use it, why you should still be right. You can start using that position in the community to amplify those voices that are deserving of amplification. That's the way you might be giving back to someone else in the community. You might be introducing them, bringing them up, tying them to kind of your own built space in the community. And I'll tackle this back maybe from a negative side, but to say the same thing. There was a talk at DEF CON like 6 years ago or 5 years ago about a guy that had built an online drug community and sold drugs in the community. And he was asked when he had to burn his identity one time that he had to start again, right? Because it was based on, your anonymous identity, and the identity was based on his PGP key, and he was having to build a new one. And he was explaining, he said, how did you get back to the top? He goes, I did all the same shit. I got in, I participated, I made myself known, I talked to other people, I had my handles show up a bunch of times, I legitimized myself as a member of this community, and then I used it to build my new market. And I'm not saying you should go build a drug market. That's not the TLDR one should take from this. But it is saying that if someone can take a new pseudo identity and build it up as another member of the community, it means that you can do this yourself, no matter who you are, by simply participating, giving more than you take, asking questions, learning, being humble, saying I'm sorry, saying I'm wrong, all those functional things. But it does take active participation. And so maybe that's the piece that I would take is, how do you leverage this for your own success? Be active in a community. Right. And if, geez, fine.
Yeah.
Fair, Slagle. Too late. Already building a drug community because Matt told me to. That'll be fun in court. Mr. Lee, did you say one should? Yes, I did, potentially. All right. We got questions in here.
I actually have a quick counterpoint. I was watching a YouTube documentary on the XZ utils that got stopped, if you know what I'm talking about. I know very little about what I'm talking about, but XZUtils is I believe it was a package that's installed on a ton of Linux devices.
Sure.
And it's an open source project, publicly supported. And it got infiltrated by a person committing to the repository and participating in the community that surrounded it for years at a time. So literally this one person infiltrated, got all the way to the top. And then one random security guy was like, my SSH is running real slow. Like, what the hell's going on? And found that it was because it was taking a bunch of network bandwidth to do calls back to this random shit. And that's how they discovered that this incredibly used, it's like, can also work negatively because that almost ended or almost created a huge issue. But
yeah, true story. We got 2 questions or 3 questions. One's not a real question, but 2 questions. So we'll tackle them out of order because I want to. Jason Slagle said, how do we encourage other users to join communities? You and I, Matt, have seen, gosh, it shifted right as someone put in a question. All right, cool, I'll find it. Have seen that we've got a group of MSPs involved in community, but I see the same 1,000 MSPs all the time. How do we get the other 29,000 involved? I'll say it here. I think we're at this moment in time, Slagle, and anybody else wanting to listen, where the self-selected will survive. You know, I was asked at a conference the other day, when would I hang up my spurs? When would I consider my mission on this earth finished? And I thought about it and tried to come up with a cute answer, but really what I came to was, should I even say this? My answer was, half of you won't be in the room. My mission is successful when we have some barriers to entry to be us, when we have a certain level of professional capability, when we can be those doctors that have stopped just putting leeches on and deciding that this modern medicine's a good egg, right? Like that we could actually move forward. And I think that those 29,000 that aren't involved, I'm not saying all of them are self-selectively not here. I think they have their own methods, their own things, and there's certainly things we're not counting. But I would agree with you, Slagle, like, if you are hearing this and you don't attend communities and aren't part of these communities, or don't go to events and don't go meet and do hallway con, do it. Do it. You won't. Do it. You should. Because in 5 to 10 years, you might not be in business. And I just mean, when you look at the shifting sands, and I know that's a bold statement to make, but there will be regulatory pressure. There will be losses. There will be non-insurability. There will be things that make it hard to be us. And I think that all it takes is having the right things to build your skills to escape the Peter principle as a company and as a human, and immerse yourself in communities. So I would take that as my point, Slagle. They don't have to be here. But the ones that are, by God, let's love the hell out of them and grow them up so they can be the 80-20 rule, so they can be the Pareto principle that might play out. Long topic discussion. All right, so what else we got? We got another one. Did I lose a question? Okay. How do you balance the broad, open-ended engagement of community group with the more focused, in-depth collaboration of peer group to maximize both learning and value for participants? Aaron's like reading the Bible, but yeah, 100%. I think there's this balance in what functions they serve, and they're still both communities. I think the broad engagement of a community is one that's the MSP geek cons, the MSP geek, the ones that have formed out of like camaraderization, people with similar interests. But in the same breath, like peer groups are an example of a kind of forced community in some extent, right? Like if I'm in the same peer group 17 with these 9 people, I'm in a community that has been created probably out of a larger community, such as PAX 8 for our peer groups, or, Evolve for Evolve's peer groups, right? And I'll even ask Slagle this on this conversation, right? Slagle had been a part of IT Nation for a long time, but now part of an Evolve peer group. I really believe that peer groups probably allow you to work more on the business, and communities let you work more on you. And I won't say that communities can be exclusive of business, but I will say that the communities for Matt Lee's personal growth. I may be at PAX 8 today. I may be at Kalamazoo, Michigan State Department tomorrow for corrections. You never know, right? But the point is that I'm in this community in this role, and the community usually is, as a global sense, is for the human. Right? Look at so many people we've seen grow their own human personal brand out of that side of it. But from a peer group, it's not time for me to be a me anymore. Now I'm going to meet and have some great relationships with a few people, but in a peer group, I'm the representative of my company's governance and issue and will. I am the representative of my company's function and what we're going to do moving forward in that regard. And most of the conversations are about the company and the people inside that company. So peer groups are a necessary part of how one would grow. In fact, if y'all don't know my backstory, we merged 4 entities that were all about $7.5 to $8 million in revenue to be one entity by a stock swap with 4 people we'd been in the same peer group with for 6 years. We knew them intimately. We liked them. And in some ways, because of that forced community, our corporate entity communities became more and more similar. Right? We were doing things the same way. We had the same employee structures. We had the same type of core values to some extent. We had a lot of those things that came together in that. So I think to your question of like community group with more focused, it is a balance, but they have different purposes, right? I'm not going to get the most out of building my company from an open community. I'm not saying that's not going to happen as a result of those humans growing, but I'm saying in a peer group, I'm forcing myself to work on those things. I have tasks, I have accountability. Most communities don't really do accountability. My community is not going to go, Connor, man, I haven't seen that new release you said you were going to do. And yet, like, it might come up in convo, but not the same way it would in a peer group. Peer group's going to be like, Connor, you said last week you'd do this. Where is it? Right? Those are very different purposes. So hope that answered your question, Aaron. By the way, Aaron Pederick, great dude. Love him to death. He has had to listen to me far longer than people should. So very nice.
It's also
good senior.
In my mind, the biggest difference between a peer group and a community is the level of intimacy that's expected. So
yeah, sure.
When I was doing Evolve presentations and I was like, hey, I've never been a part of a peer group like this. What, like, all of you in the room, tell me what it's like. And they're like, oh, like we actually go over revenue numbers, plans. Are we hitting it? Are we not? It was almost like
100%
executive coaching by proxy in my mind.
You just, you know what it really is? I don't want to show up and go, no, I didn't do it for the 5th for Rizzle, right? Like you just, it's accountability. It's pure accountability from people you care about and respect and are somewhat competitive with, right? To some extent. So, yeah.
I think balancing it is understanding that the value you can get out of a community can be practical. The value that you can get out of a peer group can be tactical. And it's not that you can't have close people in your community that you treat like peers. Like, I know many MSPs, many people of the MSP community that treat each other like peers, even though they're not in an actual peer group that they all pay to be a part of. Yeah. And then there are other people that belong to peer groups that have that. So,
well, I've seen people form their own peer groups, to your point. They're like, hey, we are 5 MSPs. Let's go meet in this one closet somewhere and talk. Yeah. Right? Like, yeah, 100%.
And think about that. That's a statement of, I like the way you think. I respect the way you make decisions. I would love to have that in my pocket so that I can make decisions better.
Yeah,
that's essentially.
We swatted each other, right? Our peer groups, we did swats on each other. We were all focused on that. So, man, that's a great question to break out. I want to cover. Antonia said a great community allows members to feel safe and comfortable to open up and share their experiences, good or bad. Knowledge shared is knowledge gained. True, because even when somebody shares something that's, let's say, empirically inaccurate, let's say someone shares something to their understanding is wrong, right? By definition, the knowledge I gain about that contextual understanding of where you are helps. Right? Even bad data is context giving, as long as you don't trust it as good data, I suppose. But anyways,
I'd agree with the safe. I don't know that I'd agree with the comfortable. Ideas should live and die in the arena, and that's an uncomfortable thing. But you should never worry about personal attack or
maybe we look at it as feel safe and comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Sure. I'll give you a great example. This is a great example. I am about to present to people with skill sets 10 times higher than mine, dedication and understanding and real community membership that is way higher in shared experience than mine, about my disingenuous attempt at Jason and I attacking MSPs to show where they stand. Like, that's terrifying. And yet I feel somewhat comfortable being here as long as I'm approaching it with that humility and what we've done and not standing up there trying to be aggrandizing. And maybe that's the last piece I'll leave with as we close this out. If you are joining a community to tell people how amazing you are, that will have a short fuse, I think. So
go to Twitter or something and build your audience that way if that's what you want.
It works out. Yeah. All right, man. I appreciate you having me, Connor. I hope we've covered everything. Thank you all so much. And really, the point I wanted to make and start this out with is, and thank you, Connor, for bringing this up as a topic, is bringing yourself into a community allows you to feel empowered to take action upon all the other things you're going to hear today that are far more valuable than what I had to say. So thank y'all so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks everyone for joining.